Hey, Susie.
Hey, Charlotte.
Okay, let's get these recordings over and done with because this is third time lucky and I've laughed every single time.
Okay, we're just going to do some very quick introductions. So I'm Susie. I'm the one on the right there with the stuffed elephant. And I'm on the right on your screen, stuffed into a tiny little bubble. And this is Charlotte.
Yeah. And this is me, Charlotte, and there's me hanging out in Stan's cargo bike moments before Susie tipped me out on the Rathgar Road in front of a load of traffic.
But she lived to tell the tale and got back in. So we work for an organisation called STAND. And STAND works mostly with students at university level. And our role is to mobilise students who want to be activists, who want to be change makers, to make the world a fairer and a more sustainable place. And so if or when you end up in third level education in Ireland, do please look out for us. You can see our logo there. And as you can see, we're very fond of kind of being imaginative and a bit silly. We travel around on bikes a lot and trains with stuffed elephants and flamingos.
Something that really interests us is imagining how the world could look differently. And we really like using our imagination, and we're really attached to this idea of radical imagination. So we use this question, what if, to help us really get our brains in gear for imagining the world differently. One of the questions that we ask is, what if there was a government department for radical imagination?
What if our cities look like forests from above?
What if there was a maximum wage as well as a minimum wage?
What if all public transport were free?
What if listening skills were prized above debating skills?
What if trees gave us oxygen in return for protection? Which, of course, they do. The questions you've just looked at are part of an exhibition that we've been running on campus, a huge outdoor exhibition. And you can see on the sides of each of those questions were artists' impressions that represent their expression of that question. So here you can see the umbilical cord tree providing bubbles of protection for people in the solar punk style.
Here's a final what if question for you. What if we could imagine a new way of living that didn't harm people and didn't harm the planet? We're going to tell you a story. It's not a story where you're going to have to just passively listen and probably get really, really bored and wander off into your own imagination. That would also be fine. But what we're going to do when we're telling this story is we're going to get you to craft and to interact with it and to ask questions and to answer questions and to reflect. So there'll be questions for you to reflect on and chat with your neighbour about, and your teacher might, at points throughout this video, pause it if they feel that you might need more time for doing some of the activities. I think you've also put sort of a reminder of pausing throughout the video. Is that right?
Yes, you'll find some little slides that give recommended or optional pause times.
So, Susie, you're going to sort of bring us through this first piece of this crafting before we even get into the story.
So what you're going to need in front of you is a piece of paper, comme ça, and I realise that it's a very small screen, so you're not going to be able to see very much what we're doing, but you'll be able to see explained on the screen. Ideally, you'll have a pair of scissors. If you don't have a pair of scissors, then when you get to the scissor part, you can just tear your paper very gently and carefully. But if you do have access to a pair of scissors, great. And then as many pens, pencils, colours, whatever you have to hand or you can get. So if you want to spend a moment going to pick those up, then go ahead now.
So Susie, you're going to talk us through what a zine is and tell us the first steps in creating it.
So we're going to turn your A4 sheet into a mini book that's also called a zine, which is short for magazine, as you may have guessed. Have anyone heard of that before or made one? They're often used by activists who want cheap ways to share their ideas, or their art and their stories. And it was especially important when people didn't have access to expensive printing methodologies. So here are a few zines that we find inspiring. And you can see they're kind of casual and crafty. And what we're going to do now is talk you through the process of making a zine. And we've put the instructions on the screen here, so you may need to follow, you may just pause the video and follow them, but otherwise I'm going to explain them in this tiny little bubble here, and you can watch me if you can and peer closely. So the first thing to do is to take a piece of A4 paper, and mine is purple, which matches the screen. Then you're going to fold it in half long ways, like this. And if you look at the top of the screen there, you'll see step 1 and step 2. So you've ended up step 2 with a nice little tent. And then you're going to fold this in half again, like this. So we're now on we've completed step 2. And we've got something that's the quarter of a size of an A4 sheet. Then you're going to fold the paper again. And now you've got something that's the 1/8 of a size, like a tiny little wee booklet. Then you're going to open up your sheet. And what you've got in front of you is now an A4 piece of paper with 8 boxes in it. And so if everything else goes wrong for you in this crafty bit, you can just use these 8 boxes for your drawings. But let's see if we can go on and complete making a proper zine. So next, you fold the paper in half, like as though you were going to make a Christmas card. You've got an A4 piece of paper and you just folded it in half, like this. Oh, finding the camera. So we're now on step 5, and you're going to turn it like this, upside down, and you're going to get your scissors.
Oh, you don't have a scissors.
Which I did have to hand.
You did have to hand. I'm going to go find your scissors.
Now don't.
You can try and do it without the scissors.
Pause my recording.
I'm going to get the charger.
And we have the scissors. So you're going to cut down like this in the middle, as you can see, step 5. But only halfway down, you see, we're just cutting a little bit. So that when you open it up again, you've got what looks like step 6. So it looks like the top of a tissue box. As you can see, there's a hole in the middle where you might pull a tissue out of. And then you're going to, now this is where Charlotte has to interrupt me sometimes in our first take. Fold it like you had it for step 2, like a long tent. And then you hold either end and you're going to push it together. So you've got a kind of diamond shape. I don't know if you can see that, but you can see it on step 7. And then we're going to just ignore step 8 for a moment. Just push the diamonds together. Okay, look very carefully in my tiny little bubble. Push them together and just fold those up. So now you have your teeny tiny little booklet. And squish it so that it's into a nice book. And then, ta-da, you have your book. And you can then number your pages if you like. So you've got your heading page where you can write a title. And then you can open your book and you've got page 1, 2, 3, and so on. So here's your little booklet. And that is the end of the zine making. So hopefully you have a little zine in front of you. And we're going to take you on now through the next section.
So I'm going to start off with this storytelling, and then I'll pass on over to Susie at various points. So we'll take turns in telling you the story. The story is called The House That Modernity Built. And it's important for you to know that it's a story that's inspired from indigenous communities in South America and also decolonial studies. Don't worry at all if you haven't a clue, or you don't need to be an expert in any of these things at all. It's just important to know this. It's a story that helps us see the world differently, and just helps us sort of understand the way the world works, or at least how certain people believe the world to work. So, Susie, do you want to maybe chat people through the first sort of ask?
Okay, so the first page you're going to take from your zine is you're going to draw a house. Maybe a bit like this pretty simple version I've done on the screen here. It's a pretty ordinary looking house, and it is going to be sitting on our planet Earth. So what you'll notice is it's a really big house sitting on quite a little planet. This is my very ordinary attempt, but you can make it as fancy or as simple as you like. And we'll give you just a minute to complete that drawing. Okay, so what we want you to think about for a minute is, what do you really like and appreciate about this planet, or your life on this planet? So just take a minute and think about all those things that you really love about being here. And again, you might want to pause this and chat with your neighbour for a little bit about that.
So, have we everyone back? There's a few things that you need to know about this house. And as I talk, you might want to continue to doodle, to draw, to write, or you can just leave it, your picture, as is. The first thing you need to know, we already mentioned it, is that this house is massive in relation to the size of the planet. So it's a lot larger than the planet it actually sits on. Actually, it doesn't really look like that there, but it's sort of too big for the planet that it sits on. That's the first thing you need to know. The second thing you need to know is that the floor or the foundations of the house represent separation. And so the floors or foundation, they're really, really strong, and they separate those in the house, the people, from what's outside the house, i.e. the environment. There's a strong separation between people and nature. The next thing you need to know about the house is that one of the walls, in this case it's the wall on the left, it represents the state. The state promises safety and belonging, but mostly the safety and belonging is only offered to those who are wealthy, who own stuff, or who have property. It's not safety and belonging for everyone. The third thing, I've jumped a little bit, but the third thing that you need to know is that wall on the right, it represents something called logic. It says that there is really only one way, or only one right way to understand the world, and only one right way to understand how the world works, and it's through logic and it's through reason. And there's only one story of development and of progress and improvement. And the final thing you need to know about this house is that the roof represents money making. And profit. And that is the main purpose of this house. And so maybe just a question for you at this stage is, and maybe you already feel that you have the right answer to this question, or again, you might want to pause and chat with your neighbour. But the question is, what does this house, do you think, represent? So again, you might just want to pause. I'm just going to go back just a second, Susie, just to maybe offer an answer. And maybe some of you suggested this. You'd be right if you said that it represents the system that we live in, or you could say the society that we live in. And when we say system, what we mean is those structures that shape how we live. So governments, money, jobs, schools, media. And so it represents, I suppose, the way that our modern world sort of exists, or how it's built. So maybe I'll move on to the page 2. of your zine, and Susie will chat you through it. So you might want to turn the page and get on to page 2 of your zine.
So for page 2, we're going to redraw the house, and this time we're going to add 2 pipes, and please feel free to make them a lot nicer than mine. So one of the pipes is going into the house, and one of the pipes is going out of the house. And as you draw the next image, I'll tell you a bit about it, and you can add things or not as you like. So there's a lovely family living in this house. Parents, granny, granddad, some kids. You probably know their names. Maybe you can jot those down. They have jobs, they have educations, they have hobbies. You might like to think about what those are. They live comfortably. They have a TV, they have laptops, they have phones, they have really nice food, they have weekly takeouts, they have a car or maybe 3. They eat a lot, they watch a lot, and they consume a lot. And it all comes into the house through this one big pipe, the one you see on the left. Have a think about what is coming in through that pipe and where it comes from. A second pipe brings the stuff out of the house and onto the planet and empties it of what it doesn't need, dumping it onto the earth. And so again, as you're drawing, think, where does all this stuff from the second pipe come from? Sorry. Where does the stuff on the left come from, and where does the stuff on the right go to? Where does it end up? And we suggest again that you have a little time to reflect and draw.
So on to page 3 of your zine. And again, we've got our planet, we've got the fairly basic looking house. And this time when you draw it, you might just, again, want to copy this drawing on the screen. And also, as I tell you a little bit more about the story, you might want to add bits and pieces to it. This time you'll see that there are stairs in the house. There's also a basement and an attic, or actually we'd like to call it the penthouse. So you might want a minute or two to draw that house. So something that the family doesn't know is that above them in the penthouse, there lives a man who's living just the finest life you can imagine. He has all the cars in the world. He goes on all the holidays, 6 or 7 holidays a year. He's got so many luxuries. He spends all his time in his jacuzzi. And you might just want to have a think about where he got his wealth from. So there's maybe a few different possibilities, but just to consider maybe where that wealth comes from. The family, as you know, live on that sort of middle second floor there. And then just below them in the basement, that's where the cleaners hang out, the workers, those who sort of keep the house going. They're often migrants, asylum seekers, refugees. And the house is running because of them. They have a dream, and their dream is that one day they might just be able to reach onto that second, or if you want to call first floor, where the middle class family live. Every so often, if they listen hard enough, the family can hear knocking coming from just below the foundations of the house and also from outside the walls. Little do they know that there's a whole load more people actually living outside the house. And you might remember that outside the house is where the pipes begin and also where the pipes end. Have a think about why they might want to get into the house. So they're knocking to get in. Why do they want to get in? Perhaps it's because their own living situation, out where the pipes begin and end, is a pretty dismal and violent place. And I'm going to skip over this slide. And the question for you now is, and again, you might want to doodle your answer, you might want to chat to someone. What happens if everyone tries to live in the house that's already too big for the planet?
So here's a final picture, and one where the walls are starting to crack and crumble. In fact, the whole house is starting to collapse. It's cracking and shaking. So we'll give you a chance to have a draw of the house crumbling and cracking and shaking. And then we want you to think about why this might be happening. And in doing that, you might look back at your earlier pictures where you could see the separate, like what was going on around, what do the bits of the house represent? You've got separation, and you've got the one way to success of the logic, you've got the profit at the top. So why is the house crumbling? So you might have come up with some answers. Maybe you mentioned climate change. Maybe you mentioned economic inequality, pollution, political or social unrest, mental health crises. And the house is now not looking too livable in, is it?
Maybe just to remember that this is a story. And again, it's just some people who tell this story to explain how the system or this system of living isn't working for so many people and isn't working for the planet in general. If it is a story that sort of is one that you believe has some truth to it, how do you feel about that? And how do you think you'd answer this final question, which is, do you think we need to fix this house? I might just go back to it here, having a look at it there. Does this house, which is crumbling and falling apart and can't hold any more people in, and the people who are already in it are causing such destruction to the house and to those outside and the planet outside the house, do we just need to fix that house? Put on a new roof, add some more walls? Do we actually need to make it bigger so everyone can fit in? But what happens if everyone actually lives in that house and lives in the way that the people inside the house are living? Or do we need to start imagining something completely different? What other types of houses or systems could be built? Are there ways of living that actually care for people and the planet?
So remember this. What if there was a government department for radical imagination? Well, I want to tell you something. You may not have heard of this yet, but there's actually going to be a radical imagination department in your school starting right now. So what we'd love you to do is to get into small groups of maybe 3 or 4. And you are the Department for Radical Imagination. So we want you to think of 5 things, 5 radical things that you're going to do to make your school fairer, kinder, and more fun for everyone. Take some time in your groups to come up with 5 of these radical ideas. And we'd love for your teacher to send us these ideas. At the end of the video, you'll see there's a QR code and some email addresses. So if you'd like them to send them to us, we will be to hear about them. And we hope that you have enjoyed this workshop. And so it's goodbye from her.
Goodbye from her.
And we didn't mess up too badly, did we?
No.
Bye.
Bye.